So today we're talking about study design, statistical study design. And basically, statistical studies collect data in order to make decisions. And we want to make sure that we make the right decisions. But the data that you use to make those decisions is only as good as the integrity of the study design. So knowing the basics of study design will allow you to determine whether your own study or a study that you're reading about, whether those results are valid or not. Now, I'm sure you've heard this phrase before. Recent studies have shown that. And as you're reading these studies, it's good to ask yourself some questions. Do I trust every study that I read? What makes a study trustworthy? Should I be skeptical of this study? So let's talk about the study design process and think about the construction of a building. The very foundation of the building is the plan. So the very foundation of our study has to be the plan, the most important part. Then you can collect the data and then you can analyze the data. So let's look a little bit deeper at this. The plan. Parts of the plan are the data collection method. How are we even going to get the data? How are we going to control for the big three compromisers, which I'll talk about? And then how do you control for bias? Once you have the plan in place, then collect the data. That's just executing the plan. And then the analyzing, that's the fun part. That's when you can describe the data, you can interpret the data, you can display the data in order for you or somebody who's reading the study to make a decision. So we're going to focus on the plan today. And let's first talk about different data collection methods. How do you get the data that you're going to even look at? Probably one of the easiest ones is the observation method. That's where you just watch and learn. In the medical community, they often do experiments where they have a control group and a treatment group and compare the two to see perhaps if a drug is going to work. Simulation, this is a mathematical or computer model that replicates conditions that can produce data for you. And then of course, one of the most common ways to get data is through a survey, either online or in person or in the mail or however you want to go get your survey results. So let's try to look through a couple scenarios and see which way was the data collected. During the COVID pandemic, the IHME model forecasted the number of deaths that the US could expect. How'd they get that data? Well, they took some data from other countries that were dealing with it, put it into a computer model and did a simulation for what the US could expect. Okay, what about this one? A sociologist wants to determine people's willingness to take money from a clear box in a crowded area. And this has been done before. How did they get the results? That was just an observational study, just watching and learning about people's behavior. Drug companies want to test a new vaccine for COVID. That will definitely be an experiment. And then what about student council wants to know how students would like to see homecoming go this year? Best way to get results from that would be for a survey. Okay, so we've got our data collection method. Now we need to look at what does a study do about controlling for the big three compromisers? Here's the thing, we have to be very careful because study results can be compromised by a number of different things. One would be confounding variables. These are variables that could confuse the results of a study. Does ice cream really have an effect on the murder rate in New York? Something to consider. Or this is what we call the Hawthorne effect. This is basically that people can change their behavior when they know they're being observed. And then something you've probably heard about before is the placebo effect. And that's that the brain can convince your body that a fake treatment is the real thing. It's crazy. So as you're reading articles about different drug trials or whatever, you could look for something called blinding. And this is to make sure that the subject doesn't know if he or she is taking the real thing or the fake thing, something to look out for. Okay, so you've looked at the data collection method, the control of the big three compromisers, and then what about bias? What about bias? Now, bias is that's a four-letter word in statistics, something you really, really have to be careful with because that's basically looking at data that will only give you the answers you want. That's not going to help you get a true, honest, objective decision out of your data. So that's it. That's the overview, the big picture of study design, something for when you're looking at your own research or if you're reading articles that have done any sort of statistical research, that you know what kind of things to look for. Thanks.